With UN climate talks now underway in Doha, how willing are scientists to publicly make their case that global warming is man-made? They're well used to the skeptics who challenge their science, but many are tiring of the personal abuse and harassment they're suffering from those who disagree with them and, as a result, withdrawing from the public debate. Marc Morano is editor of a news website called climatedepot.com, who's got it in for climate scientists. He joined me on the line earlier, as did Professor Michael Mann, director of the Earth System Science Centre at Penn State University and author of The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars. He's been targeted by Mr. Morano, but asked not to debate with him directly. First, I asked Professor Mann to describe what had happened to him.
Ever since my colleagues and I published this graph more than a decade ago, known as the hockey stick, which demonstrates how unprecedented recent warming is in a long-term context, we have been subject to attacks by those looking to discredit the science. When the hockey stick became an icon in the climate change debate, it placed me directly in the crosshairs of those looking to discredit the science of climate change because they find its implications inconvenient, frankly.
Well, it's one thing to discredit the science, but it's another to mount personal attacks on those behind the science. Is that what's been happening to you?
Well, indeed. I've been personally threatened with violence. I've had death threats. I've had substances sent to me in the mail where I had to have the FBI come in and do a test to make sure I hadn't been subject to a dangerous substance. I'm constantly under attack in various sort of right-leaning news venues, character attacks against me. I've had my family brought into the matter. I've had threats made against my family where I've had to call in the authorities. And all of this because I guess I had the temerity to publish a graph more than 10 years ago that built on a vast array of evidence that tells us that, in fact, we are warming the planet and changing the climate.
Well, let's bring in Marc Morano. And Mr. Morano, are you putting people up to this?
No, not at all. I put sometimes publicly available emails I've posted on my website throughout the years. I don't even know how many times I've ever even posted Michael Mann's email. But this goes with the territory. He's political and scientific debate, and he's here acting as though he's some kind of victim. I've gotten emails just earlier this year about people wanting to hang me. And when I was in the United States Senate working for Senator James Inhofe, we had to report stuff to the Senate security because we got threatening physical violence emails because of the work I was doing on the skeptical side. You have NASA's James Hansen accusing skeptics of, quote, crimes against humanity, raising the Nuremberg-style trials. And I don't see the BBC covering skeptics' hate mail.
But you do admit that you encourage climate change skeptics to get in touch with the scientists who are putting the science out there. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Here's what's going on. Someone like Michael Mann, he's feted by the media. He wouldn't know what a hostile interview was if it came up to him. And he gets all this fawning praise. He goes to the United Nations conference. It was very refreshing when after the ClimateGate emails, people could see the collusion behind the scenes of Michael Mann and the other upper echelon of the UN crafting a narrative of how they were going to have basically a partisan campaign to present the science and exclude people they didn't like. And to have the public finally be able to reach these scientists and they could actually hear that their actions and their claims have consequences. And the idea that study built upon all this. There was a Wegman report in Congress, which Gerald North and other scientists agreed with the conclusions that showed this was an echo chamber of Michael Mann and his colleagues. And beyond that, new peer-reviewed studies, one just came out in the Journal of Global and Planetary Change, showing the Earth was warmer 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. So
Mr. Morano, I'm going to have to leave it there because we're drifting slightly from the topic, which is
he plays the part of martyr very well. He plays the part of martyr.
Okay, Professor, Mr. Morano, they're basically saying you've got to man up.
Yeah, so I think we've seen a display of the sort of dishonesty and the sort of antagonism by people like Morano that is so hurtful to the public discourse on this issue. Literally everything he said was untrue. He spreads malicious lies about scientists, paints us as enemies of the people, then uses language that makes it sound like we should be subject to death threats, that we should be literally harmed or killed because we're supposedly perpetrating a fraud, as he and his ilk would have us believe. And in reality, what you need to understand is that Mr. Morano is funded by some of the largest right-wing interests. He's been funded by the fossil fuel industry, by the Scaife Foundations. He's a hired assassin who helped vilify John Kerry. He was behind the Swift Boat campaign to discredit John Kerry more than a decade ago. And now what he's doing, he's paid by those very same vested interests to Swift Boat climate scientists to try to distort our work, to try to undermine the public's credibility in the science. What he wouldn't have you know is that because of the bogus allegations that he and his ilk have made against people like me, we actually had to have the National Science Foundation do an investigation into me to see if there was any impropriety in anything that I've done in my scientific career. And they came back and what they said was there's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever, despite the claims made by people like Marc Morano. It's very hurtful to the discussion.
That was Michael Mann.